Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the show, Fernando.
Welcome to the show, guys.
You excited about this one?
I'm excited, yes,
You have no idea what we're doing, even though
no idea.
You should know what we're doing because you talked to this guy for 45 minutes the other day.
Yes, we did.
I talked to him for 10 minutes this morning, and I changed everything.
No, I know. I mean, we talked about this before.
Yeah.
And he's like, I just rather to keep my speakers, and I say, fine.
Apparently, he had a weekend where he was like, you know what?
He said that. He told me, listen, I have to go home, process whatever you say, and then I can decide, or I can come back and say, you know what, now let's do something else. And I'm like, all right, sounds good.
So what are we talking about? We have a 2008 Chrysler Town Country. So let's take a look inside and see what the factory has, see what we want to retain, see what we can't retain. Let's just jump in. I'm a big fan of these stow and go minivans. I actually thought about getting one of these instead of my Mustang just because of, well, it's roomy. But then I realized I'm the only one in it and, well, didn't need it. This guy has the dual drop down monitor system along with the in-dash unit. Has the older navigation, so he's using this Garmin right now. And then behind that is the DVD player. I love the custom mount made out of the old wine box. That's pretty cool. We can pull that out. This is connected to all three monitors. We're gonna try to retain that. And then it does have a backup camera, which has got a good view of the ceiling right now. The back door is open. Now, as far as the backup camera goes, especially with these older vehicles, sometimes it might be better just to replace it with the factory. Only because the factory really, well, they're not that expensive. Keep in mind though, that the factory's resolution is only so good. And it might not actually be the lens on the camera or something like that that's bad. It just might be a low-res camera, and that's why you might want to replace it with a newer one. He's button cleaned the lens on this camera. He's like, yeah, we'll see what it looks like. I can buy a new one from the factory for 150 bucks. I was like, you probably get it on eBay cheaper. The nice thing about doing that is all you have to do is unplug this camera, plug the new one in, and you're done. You don't have to run any wires. That's why the argument for it is kind of good. Let's take a look at the equipment that we are going to be taking all this stuff out with. I'm excited about this. This is going to be fun. First off, for all the integration needs, we'll be doing our iData interface. So we're using the RR. This takes the CH1 harness, and then the AV-CH1 is what's going to allow us to retain our backup camera and overheads and whatnot. We'll test all of this once we get to it to see what we can retain, what we can't retain, what works, what doesn't work. Speaker-wise, we are going to do our favorites, the KFC 6903Cs, 3.5s in the top of the dash, 6.9s in the lower door. We're gonna have a bass knob to power one of our favorites, the X802.5 5-channel amp. The 5-channel amp, we're going to do a front stage upgrade with. That means that that amp is going to just power these speakers here. Channels 1 and 2 will be powering those. Channels 3 and 4 will be powering that. The radio will be powering what is already installed in the rear. He wants a Garmin navigation system. Even though CarPlay, Android Auto, where he lives, the navigation works better. He does a lot of traveling, and he sometimes... Anyways, he wants the Garmin nav. We're going to do the DNX697S for this particular vehicle. It also has a DVD CD player built into it because we may need that with the overheads, we may not. And then we'll be installing a standalone USB. We need an antenna adapter, which we'll talk about, and of course a dash kit. Once we get over to that, we'll describe all of the funness that is those. In the meantime, we need to get some parts of the car apart, like the radio, get that out of the dash. Because if I recall, I haven't done one of these in a minute, but that dash is really tight. Like getting a full-size chassis in there, it's gonna be rough. Yay. Let's start with that first. Join me in the vehicle, guys. This car does have steering wheel controls. They're located on the back of the steering wheel here. Chrysler typically does that. If you've never worked on one before and you're like, there's no buttons, check behind the steering wheel. We want to make sure we program those in, and the RR will do that. Get this radio out of the dash. We have to start by removing the top piece here, and there's two little tiny clips that open up and allow us to remove these two screws. For that, we're going to use our really thin pry tool. Open both the doors. Phillips screw. When working on cars, we like to use these little totes. Put all our screws and parts in. We have a couple of them depending on where we're working at on the car. If you're doing this at your house, just steal your wife's Tupperware works really nice. Using cup holders and stuff like that do work. The problem is that sometimes you need to get those parts of the car out and then you knock all the screws and you could possibly lose them. Rubber totes are pretty awesome. That gets this top piece free. However, we do need to remove this whole back piece here along with these A-pillars. We got a lot of work to do to get this piece out. Now this does have airbag side pillars. It's just got these little clips that you need extra, it's an extra step. It's kind of a pain, but you also need to remove the side of the dash here. That same tool will allow you to do that. There's 3 of these airbag clips along this here. They just have a clip here at the top and then they extend and you pry it off. I mean, it's fairly simple. You saw how quick I got it off. The reason why you have to pull them off is all the way up at the front of the dasher, there's a little tongue that sticks over like this. Now that side is 2 screws that we have to get off. For that, I'm switching to my plastic pry tool because this is plastic on plastic, and this is like a rubber Torx screw, T30. Because of the screws, this does not have any of the clips on it like the driver's side has. This also has that same tongue that sticks over here onto the side. To get this top piece up, we'll use that same plastic pry tool and we'll slowly work our way across the dash. This is probably the scariest part of the day. Pull the whole dash this way and it'll unclip, and then find someplace very flat and out of the way to set this on. Now the reality is you could just lift this up like this, remove all of this and be perfectly fine. Taking this whole piece off probably isn't totally necessary, but because we are going to be in here with amplifiers and stuff like that, I don't want to have this in my way. There's 2 Phillips screws towards the back here that if you look in the windshield, you can actually see pretty well. While I have my right angle tool on, I'm also going to remove the speakers from the dash. This is the little guy here that we're replacing. We'll take a look at that once we get over to the bench. Clip the 2 screw hole panels, clip them back into place because they could fall out while you're moving this thing around. You definitely don't want to lose them. Unlike most Dodge dashes, this one is way overcomplicated. We're going to have 2 screws up here and you'd think, yay, this is the end of it, but the reality is no. Now we have to move down here to the bottom, get this out of the way so that we can get this part out. On the side here, there's 3 nylon screws. 3 more on this side. This is what they look like. Couple clips below the DVD player, and the whole thing will slide out. Don't forget to unclip the power ports. On the bottom here, there are 2 more Phillips screws. You can also remove the cup holder at this time if you feel you need to. I don't. And it easily comes right off. However, on the back side of it, there's a lot of plugs. Some of them have the safety retention clips on them. It's the red that you have to usually pull up on or push in some weird direction. Usually cannot get them off with just your fingers. And now we can actually remove the radio with the 4 Phillips screws. It's also a 7mm if you have one of those. This one has Sirius XM, which is this mustard color. The white one here that did not want to come out because it's caught up in the factory mount of the radio, which is pretty awesome, is the FM antenna. Most cars, not all, but most cars, you can tell the difference between a Sirius XM and the regular antenna because the Sirius XM is typically mustard and a thin cable, and the FM antenna is typically white with a fatter cable. This one, you can tell, has the video because it has this white harness. The gray harness is standard. This also tells us whether or not there's an amplifier in this car. If it has 8 speaker wires, which are these wires over here on the side, because this is data, this harness is comprised of a power, which is this yellow-red, a ground, which is black, a set of data connections, which is the white orange, white, brown. These 8 wires over here are speaker wires. This whole harness is going to be for the DVD player, backup camera, and overheads. And it is tight up in this dash. This is where the fun begins because this is not a normal double din opening. This is actually smaller than a double din. We are going to have to do some cutting. We're going to have to cut along here, and then we're going to have to do some cutting along the bottom. There's also a metal structure back here. It's screwed into the top here. That is going to have to come out. So we'll have to do some cutting along the sides. That or drill these welds, which doesn't seem too exciting. This part of the operation definitely is going to take a minute. With my mess all cleaned up, the radio opening is trimmed up and ready to accept our radio. We removed the metal bracket. We've opened up the hole big enough for the double din to come in. We've also taken a section out of the back here for the chassis as it goes in and for the wiring because this piece sticks up. There's no reason to not take advantage of this extra space because we have the RR, which is a brain box, which is going to take up room. We have all the RCAs, so taking advantage of this extra space is most important. And that's it. Most of this work could have been avoided by simply just going with a short chassis radio. However, because we need a DVD, obviously navigation, we didn't get so lucky. It happens. Let's go over here to the bench. We'll unbox the radio, the harness. We'll go through all the parts as to what it's going to take to get a radio into this. I want to get the radio at least powered up into the car before I get all the finish work done on it because I want to make sure like that all the overhead and DVD and all that stuff is going to work. Even though it's an older vehicle, he's not even worried about that. It's been a minute since I've done one of these. I just want to make sure, you know. First up on the list is the DNX 697S. Inside the box, main wiring harness. Kenwood will give you a long purple white wire for reverse and a long light green wire for the emergency brake. There's also these 2 strange wires off to the side that are not normal, and it says cam plus, cam negative, and it's a green with a red and a green with a white. These are for a specific Kenwood camera and nothing else. Otherwise, all the wiring on here is identical to what you're used to. White is driver's front, gray is passenger front, green is driver's rear, purple is passenger rear. There's a yellow constant 12 volts, a green accessory, a black ground, and then there's a blue. There's a blue, which is power antenna, a blue white, which is amplifier turn on, and then there's the blue yellow, which is your steering wheel control input wire, which we will not be using because we're going to be doing RR, which is a data connection. Lastly, there is a orange with a white stripe, which is illumination. These are all the same colors. These will all match up to our iData harness. Bag of screws. This uses an M5 machine screw, not a coarse screw. The hands-free microphone comes double bagged. This particular unit is capable of multicam, so it comes with an additional input if you're planning on using the aux input as a camera input, as well as it's a dual USB. There's a gray and a black. GPS means GPS antenna. Now that used to be the case, however, in some cases now if you have wireless CarPlay or Android Auto, you're also getting a GPS antenna. Make sure if you get one you install it because your wireless will not work. This is not wireless, it just needs it for the Garmin system. There's some random radio parts in the owner's manual. Kenwood still feels the need to give you a cage for their double-in radios, which is good or bad depending on how you look at it. They also give you this trim ring here to snap over it. So if you're doing some form of a custom installation where you have to mount the radio, Kenwood is a really good option because they still give you this. Taking a closer look at the back of the radio, the dual USBs are pigtails. There are these 4 yellow connections. You have video out, which will feed this DVD player to the overhead console. You have third view camera, which is part of the multicam system. Dash cam or front cam. If you are using a dash cam and you still want to do a front cam, That's what you use the third view camera for. And then rear cam, which this does have. I like to remove the little covers over the ones I'm going to use just so I have an idea as I'm moving through it. You have an AV output. You have AV in over here, which is what the multi-cam input is for. Or if you need to bring in audio from that bottom DVD player, it's going to go into this input here. Dash cam plugs into the white connection. RR plugs into this black connector here, as well as this 1/8 inch connector. Sirius XM, if you're going to use it, goes here. Wireless mic and the GPS antenna. FM antenna is a pigtail. And then the RCAs go rear, front, sub. Kenwood is unique to that, and if you go front rear sub, well, you're going to be disappointed in the end. Looking on the other side, top is the CD DVD player, and then all our buttons are located on the side panel here. It does have a micro SD input, and right below it, it says Garmin. If this ever needs an update, that is where it is going to go. Until then though, you can use it as a micro SD card for music, movies, whatever you want, but once you have to do the update, that will no longer be the case. Home button, volume up and down, force the camera issue or navigation, attenuation or menu, and press and hold for voice on the bottom, round up the package. That's what we have for radio. We'll need these harnesses here in different configurations. I am gonna need some pieces that aren't here. For one, that AV input, I'm gonna need an aux jack to RCA so that I can get the sound from the DVD player into the main system. We have a single USB adapter. I'll probably grab a dual or a second USB adapter so you have access to both. So let's open all these up and see what comes in the boxes. We'll start with the AV. We have an aux jack for audio. We'll need this so that we can get the audio from the radio back to the wireless transmitting system on it, because this has multi-zone. And then looking closely at it, we have a ground. It's labeled AV out, AV in, and then camera. And it's covered in black electrical tape, which I'm not thrilled with, but you know, whatever. And it has that white connector that the car has. The RCH1, when you're installing an iData, make sure you look at the picture for the wiring carefully, because in some cases you may need the OBD2 connection plugged in some cases you don't. There's a great diagram, which you'll see in a minute, that shows you all the harnesses and where they go and everything, and you don't want to just plug things in that don't need to be plugged in. Or hooked up for that matter. A lot of the times I'll see these when people bring them in because they're not working right, and they'll have hooked up the steering wheel controls and plugged in all the cables, and they didn't need it. That's actually what's causing some of the headaches they're having. For this, they make a cable that has a 3-pin black connector to aux jack style input in one bag, and then in the other bag they make a 4-pin on both ends that's blue, white, black, and red. Those are the two harnesses that most of the time you will need. You don't always need this little aux harness, but I grabbed them both. The rest of this we're not going to need. If you need a USB to flash your unit, that's in there as well, but the rest is not necessary. If you've never flashed an RR module before, go over to maestro.com, download the software to either a Windows or a Mac. It really doesn't matter. Grab your brain and plug it in, and then flash. Flash by vehicle. This is an 08 Chrysler Town and Country. Gives you the option for steering wheel controls. Those are those buttons on the back. Kenwood. Always keep that box close by because you're going to need the model number and the serial number off the box. DNX697. The serial number is located directly underneath the part number, and it says S/number. CH1 harness. It should give us the options for all the other parts that could be available. If it has a factory GPS antenna or if we're retaining Sirius XM, all those parts will be listed here. If we want to add a K40, then it brings us to this page where you get to answer a couple questions. This does not have a factory amplifier. We want to turn that on. Parking assist, advanced camera features, steering wheel controls, rear seat video retention. If it has it, click yes. And then we get to the steering wheel control programming, which is one of my favorites. The only thing that I have complaints on is Some people like to hold the volume down button, and when you do that, it mutes the stereo. That kind of bugs people for some reason. I don't know. I turn it off. When you get there, flash the unit, sit back, relax, wait for it to do its thing. Once you get to this page, there's a couple of things that you can email out to the customer if you want, as well as we want to get the install guide. One of the things that drives Fernando crazy about their install guides is they give you every single install guide, so now you have to go through and search for your vehicle. I like to shrink the page down. It is going to start with Chrysler. So scroll down until you get to the Town and Country. Find your year. In this case, ours is a 2009. This is 8 to 11. This is the guy we want. Gives you some basic instructions. This is where it's going to talk about that 8 speaker wiring on the plug. If it's a 4, it's an amplified system. If it's an 8, it's a non-amplified system. Make sure you follow the instructions on that. If you don't, you won't get any sound from people talking to you over the hands-free. And then scroll down to the main page here. This section where you see the white and green and white are that part about how to switch it if you have amplified versus non-amplified. This is also showing us that we are going to need our OBD2 connection, and that the only connection between the radio and the harness is going to be the 4-pin connection, which is this guy here. We won't need the aux jack. Down here in the bottom of the page, it does list all the harnesses that come in that box that we don't need. There's that little aux jack there, the main harness, the steering wheel controls, the power. They're all going to be part of this main harness here. It shows us having 2 plugs plugged in. This secondary plug was not being used from their radio, so we won't need to do that. That's this little guy right here. This car didn't have that. It also shows that the black to black is connected and the red is not. And that's this red here and this black to black. Well, all right. Now that we have all that information in hand, we can get going on getting these pieces connected. For this, we are going to be doing active front only off of the amplifier. That means we're going to have to connect the green and purple from here to the green and purple on this. The white and gray are going to be our mid-bass wires going into the door. Then we are going to run 2 new wires down from each side of the car into the dash area, which will be our 3.5-inch coaxials to power those off of channels 1 and 2. When I'm doing the wiring harness, I remove the radio from my work area. I'm gonna have a soldering gun, I'm gonna have strippers and crimpers. I don't wanna scratch the screen, so put it someplace else. The first thing I like to do is connect the harnesses like these to this unit. They're not going anywhere, they're just laying in a pile of other black harnesses. This can easily get knocked onto the floor. Plug that in, since that's the only we need. If I needed both, I'd plug both those in and I can set this aside. As I said, I'm not a big fan of this tape that's on here. That means I'm going to remove it and start over. That is a personal thing. This is RCA's. You could easily just zip tie this up. They're shielded. There's no metal in this dash. You could put little bands around it, whatever you like. I am going to break this into its components here. So I have an output, I have an input, and I have a camera. My plan is to separate them all into those specific groups, just to make it easier for me. The tape that I'm using is exterior tape. I don't know if it's any better, but it makes a little bit more sense to me. I have my AV in, my AV out, my camera now are all separated along with that ground. I've also put an end on it. And with that done, I can move on to the main wiring harness. This car doesn't have that little gray cube here, and that just happens to be on its own little plug. It can be removed from the harness, which is this guy right here. Don't need it. And these are the plugs for front and rear. When it's connected like this, meaning matching in color, this is for if there is a factory amp. When you match the speaker color but not the plug color, this is when there is no factory amp, which is how we're going to be using it. The red plug is not being used since we've already removed the tape. pull that out. There's a black with a yellow stripe that is on this harness, which is foot brake. We don't need that for this vehicle for any reason. There's also a brown wire on the accessories harness that is for cellular phone mute that this does not have a trigger for. I like to remove that too. With that done, that leaves us with our 8 speaker wires that match the colors of the Kenwood. Leaves us with the black, the yellow, the red. Matches up to our Kenwood harness. A blue with a white stripe. This always gets hooked up whether there's an amplifier or not. I just always hook it up. Our purple with white, our orange, and then there's this pink wire here. The pink wire is VSS, and even though this radio doesn't require it, I just cap it off and put it into the harness in case at some point he decides to get a wireless Android Auto or CarPlay radio. You are going to want to use that wire. Next is to get this all buttoned up. One of the things I do to every harness is I add in some extra connections. So I add in an extra accessory, power and ground. That way if he ever decides to get maybe a dash cam or a rear cam or a side cam or something like that, I have those connections there. If I'm not doing an amplifier, I add in an extra remote turn on. Now, one of the things I should say about this way of doing this harness, this is one of the older harnesses that iData makes. Moving forward, iData's new harnesses are plug and play compatible. You can buy them and they have an end on them, and then you can buy an extra piece that this will just plug into. There's no connection necessary. It's really kind of cool. However, some of the older inventory, we got to move through that before we get to it, so I'll just settle for soldering this one up, no big deal. Here's those 3 wires, and then my remote turn on is actually extra long. I'm going to bundle that up with my white and gray, which are my front speaker wires, because this will be going off to the amplifier. I want that remote turn on wire to run with those. All right, and 3, 2, and it's done. This is the OBD2. I added some tape to that. I like to put shrink wrap on the ends here to hold the tape in place. The main harness is in this nice T-shape. This will go off to the amplifier. These are our 3 wires for expansion. The ground for the other harness can plug into this. This is the iData connection that'll go into the back of the radio. Main brain over here. OBD2 plugs into this. This is everything that we need in order to get it into the car. I can plug this in right now and I can test everything and see what works, what doesn't work, and if I have all the parts that I need to make that happen. Join me in the car. Could you do me a favor? Could you start up the car?
Of course.
And put it in reverse for me?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not doing anything.
I know you're not.
Ready?
Yeah. Hang on, I'll wait for it to boot back up.
Ready?
Yep. Alright, and there is our camera. We have that nice view of the ceiling.
You see it?
So the backup camera works. Now the one thing that I did notice is we'll get out of here and we'll pull up the cam. So the cam isn't going to come up when I press and hold the cam button. It is only going to come up when I put it in reverse because it is the factory cam. Sometimes when retaining the factory camera, that is going to happen that way because it is powered up the way the factory uses it. In this particular vehicle, it is only powered when the car is in reverse. Therefore, you can't force it on this. Some cars you can, some cars you can't. Now we have the screen in the back. Let's press play.
Yeah.
You relaxed?
Oh, dude, I'm just watching a movie right now. Look at that.
Here's what we've figured out. We have a DVD in here right now, and it is playing out to these screens. Mm-hmm. Yours back there?
Yeah, I got a screen back there.
It's coming from this, so we can hear the audio from this. We can hear the audio from this in the system right now. We can also put a DVD into this, and it'll play back there, and you can wear headphones. And we can also, because we're using that backup camera input, we're taking the video off of this into this unit right here. So we can display it. That means if we wanted to just get through the menu system to make sure it works, we could do that. This has dual zone capability, which is kind of cool, which means I can come into here, select audio, select dual zone, And if I select dual zone, I can actually get volume for just the rear speakers and play a different source up front. I could select FM if I wanted. Yeah. And I could listen to the FM radio on the front speakers. Right now we'll just leave it disc so that we know it works. Put this back on single zone. It will shut off the subwoofer if I do that, because you don't want a sub in the back of the car beating away and sounding terrible. This configuration gives us the ability to monitor and play movies from the main unit to the back units, from the front DVD player to the back unit. It's kind of confusing, there's no doubt about it. The biggest is that if I wanted the audio to come from that DVD player into this unit, which I really don't need because I could just put the DVD into this unit to do that, I need a cable called a C3CAV, which Kenwood makes. Nobody has right now. And the problem is which we made a video like 2 years ago showing the difference between an aux to 4-pin. There's 3 different types. So it's a real pain to try to find the one that we need from Kenwood. A couple places used to make them, they don't make them anymore. So it kind of stinks. We still can do everything we want to do for this. They can be in the back playing the factory DVD player, put some headphones on, sit back there, be asleep, do whatever they need. The person in the second row could be watching the front DVD player, and the person in the front of the car could be listening to FM. You could have 3 different things going on in this vehicle at the same time. How cool is that? I mean, you agree? Wake up.
Yes.
That's all you got for me is yes?
Yeah, sure.
Either way, this system is all set and ready to go. I can now get the radio brackets screwed on, so let's go over the bench and get the radio finalized. I'm just gonna leave this harness the way it is. I'm gonna put some shrink wrap over those RCA connections. And yeah, that's it. Join me at the bench. Before I put the dash kit onto the radio, I do also want to mention the antenna adapter we're using is a BAA22. This just plugs in, no amplification or anything like that. For the dash kit, this is a little bit different. We are going to use some Alpine brackets. Alpine makes these, they're the WRA-I407 BKTS brackets. You can get them from a place called Pack Parts out of California. Why I like these brackets and why we're going to use them is that this Kenwood has a really narrow face, meaning it doesn't stick out very far, and these brackets are perfectly flat. That will allow us to add these to the side like so, mount it into the dash, keeping it as clean looking as we can. They're marked right and left. Set that into place. Get the bag of screws that the radio came with, which was those M5 machine screws. Screw this guy in and see how it looks. We may need to drill these holes a little bigger just to slide the radio back some to avoid seeing that gray edge right there. No problem. Yeah, we just need like just a little hair, and that'll pull that back and hide that gray. To do that, we can just use our uni bit. I'm gonna pick a corner here and here to do it. I'm gonna grab the dash bezel and see how it all fits on there. There we go. That silver matches the silver, it looks pretty good. The nice thing about these brackets, if you've ever used a Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge bracket before, they're plastic. These are metal, which means this really gets in the dash and stays nice and firm in the dash. The last thing I need to do to this radio to make it ready is zip tie up these RCAs. I don't like leaving them loose to flop around. When you do that, they can get caught up in all the little cracks and crevices of the dash. I'd like to zip tie them into a bundle because that makes it less likely for that to happen if they're all in one big area. When cutting zip ties, make sure to use a flush cutter. This way you will not hurt yourself. Unless you're into that whole like cutting thing, in which case, you know, hey, there we go. The radio is all set. We are done now with the prep work for the radio. We know what works, we know what doesn't work. We have this mounted, we have the harness. That means it's time to move on to another part of the install. For the dual USB, we will be using the Stinger Select SS USB 2. It is a dual USB piece. It's a little bit bigger than a standard cigarette lighter size, but it gives us dual USB that we can run up to the radio. For For the rear speakers, he actually already has a set of the Rockford TMS 69s installed. He wanted something shallow that fit inside of here. These motorcycle speakers fit the bill perfectly. He was gonna put this set in the front doors, and then he decided that he would much rather have the active front stage than just another set of 6x9s in the bottom of the door. I was like, that's a great idea. Let's take a look at those door speakers we're gonna be using, the KFC XP6903Cs. If you've never seen these before, they come loaded with a ton of stuff to make your installation easier. Going back to the cover, I almost forgot. These work great for Toyotas, Dodges, and Chryslers. They also work in Chevys. They have a 2 version instead of the 3. The 2 has a 2.5-inch middler. Sounds amazing. That one would be for your Chevy. The 3.5 is a little big. You'd have to do some cutting to get that to fit. Inside the box though, warranty cards, whatnot. This is the magic right here. This bracket is what allows all of this to happen. These are the Chevy mounts here. This big outside is Toyota. You can break all of this off and you'll have just a 5/8 inch spacer. There's little notches for the wire to run through. This is a really cool piece. They also give you foam to go on the front, kind of fast ring-ish, which we'll be using. Removing the top, and there's doubles of everything. Grabbing the 6x9. These 6x9s are specifically made to fit into these vehicles. It does come with another spacer here, but what makes this speaker so nice is that it is shallow, but has a ton of sound. This will fit right into the front of a Dodge, not have to worry about hitting the window or the roll-up mechanism, which is great. On the back side, it has the crossover and it says bypass or low pass. So if your amplifier doesn't have a bandpass, or if you're using the factory premium audio such as a Beats by Dre or an Alpine, you pick one of those. If you're using a factory amplified, you select bypass. If you're using an aftermarket amplifier that doesn't have a bandpass channel, you just select low pass. That'll put a top on this, and then you can use your amplifier for the high pass crossover. The 3.5, this is a special little 3.5. What makes it so unique is that this right here, tweeter does not stick up out of it, because a lot of times when these dash covers go back on, you can't have a tweeter that's excited and sticks out far. It will hit the dash and or it will hit the speaker itself. This has a cap right here for the tweeter. This is bi-ampable, meaning if you wanted to run this as a dedicated 3-way set, you can, or you can leave it the way it is and it will just be a coaxial, but the wire is run here along the back, which makes it cool to do that. The crossovers for the 3.5s are located right here, and then there's a ton more foam. Foam for the back of the speakers, foam for the 3.5, foam for the crossovers, screws, wiring, it's all in here. It's a really nice kit. I'm gonna get this over to Fernando so that he can get the crossovers wired up and get that wire run in the dash for us. To get the speaker wire ran in the dash?
Yes, it is there.
It is here?
It is there.
All right, look at this. This is gray with orange. This one is white with orange. We have our giant zip tie that we use for a snake. Fernando hasn't screwed them in yet. Down here is the crossover.
Yeah.
It is located right here. Crossover zip tied down here to the main harness. I can feel it in there. It's right there. Since these are done, what have you moved on to?
I moved to the microphone. I'm gonna run it. So it goes around here. A few zip ties with their loom so it doesn't damage anything behind it, because we cannot take it out. So we're gonna run it, protect the wire.
You're so good.
I know. Thank you guys, thank you guys. Taking the driver's door off, first thing is you have to locate where are normally your screws. This one, it's easier. It's only 2 screws, one right here on the handle and one in the lever. You normally go around it just to see if you have more, but in this case it's only 2. So grab your pry tool. This is pretty cool. Looks like they already tried to pull it out. Then we're gonna grab a T20. Then the second one, it's on the handle. Slowly. Now you're gonna grab your pry tool. Plastic, it's better, so you don't scratch nothing. And then you go around. See, normally they have these sail panels. 2 clips. Kind of push it up. And there it is. Start disconnecting. So what I like to do is push it coming from this side. There you go. For the handle, I have this expensive tool. Put it on. And there it is. Speaker has the same screws, so you don't have to change it. There it is. Time to upgrade the speaker. Added the foam that came with the Kenwood kit, just like the factory. Plug it in. We're using the low pass. And I like to put my screws halfway in, just to make sure this line up. And the last piece. Now you put the door in reverse order and you're good to go.
For our amplifier, we've picked the Kenwood Exelon X802.5, one of my favorite amplifiers. I love the size, the power, the way it's just laid out, everything about this amp I'm a fan of. Some people out there do complain about the screw down style terminals. You know what? I don't care. I'll take those too. As far as performance, value, and size, this is a hard amp. With that, the specs, 50 watts by 4 and 500 by 1, which is going to be perfect for the P312 we're going to be running. Now, we've dynoed this amplifier. It puts out nowhere near 50 watts. This thing is definitely underrated on how much power. At 4 ohms, I believe we were getting close to 80 watts on this, so plenty of power for what we're trying to do here today. This piece comes off and allows us access to the front or the power input side of the amplifier. It has an input for a bass knob. It is not included in the box. It's a separate piece you do have to buy. And even though this radio has subwoofer level control, he would like a bass knob. So we have their little bass knob, standard phone style jack connection. High level input is separate from the RCAs. The high level input is in the bag with the instruction manual. A, B, and sub level inputs. These are those screw down terminals, and it goes front across the top, rear across the bottom, and then these two over here on the end are your subwoofer, power, remote, ground. It's 330 amp fuses. If you flip it around to the back, subwoofer input or AB, so if you just have a source unit that has a front and rear only, you can leave that to it and it'll give you a non-fade. We have A gain, B gain, sub gain, bass boost, crossover for sub, selectable between 50 and 200, which is all the channels. High pass on and off. The sub is always on because it can only be a sub output, but this is the little sexy beast that it is. This is gonna go underneath the front driver's seat. We have to come up with some form of a mount for it and get it into the car, along with getting all the wires up to the dash. Let's hop into the car and figure that out. This is a stone go vehicle, which means there is not a lot of room because the seats all collapse into the floor, but there is room underneath this driver's passenger seat. This is the driver's side. But that's it, like there's a metal brace back here and that's where it stops because the other seat folds into it. And this amp fits perfect. That's one of the reasons why we chose this amplifier. But mounting it into place so it obviously doesn't roll around is gonna be interesting. And why that is because like this metal part of the seat is bolted through the floor of the vehicle, which is fine. And I don't even really want to worry about that so much. What I'm thinking is I want to make a bracket that comes all the way across the front here and then folds up to this area here, and then put 2 nutserts, drill a nutsert into this, put another one in this side, and screw my amp into that bracket with the power wire facing back. I can then get my speaker wires to run up into the dash and my RCAs. My power wire can come over here off to the side. There's a tunnel in order to do that. And I think that would make the most sense because I can lift this up off the floor just a little bit so that it has some clearance off of the carpet. These aren't going to be fun to drill through, but we drilled out those weld points earlier today, so it shouldn't be any different. And then just nice nut certain this, screw it into place. It'll be like those drawers that come out that these vans typically have. And I'll leave an area in the front so that I can get to all these controls. And that's the plan. I'm gonna grab a tape measure, some paper, and I'll meet you over by the saw where we'll put this all together. This is not very comfortable. I have my measurements. I need a piece that is 10.5 by 16 3/4. I need to remove these two pieces right here. And this is what I want to make. I'm gonna fold these to 90s, then this will slide right in there. Those will screw in. Actually, it's gonna be like this, so that the ABS, this part is on the outside. Amplifier is gonna sit right here. You kind of get what it's gonna look like, right? This is the final. It's gonna sit just like this in the car, so kind of cartridge load in. Screws, mounting, wire, that's all what I have to look forward to now. Anytime you screw into ABS, make sure you drill a hole first. Don't just put a screw right into it. It does not like that, will not cooperate, and will not be your friend. On the back side, it has these little points. I like to grind them off. Now it is time to get my wires connected. The first thing I want to do is get my power section hooked up. I have it all in braided sleeve. I have some Stinger 4 gauge with the 5-star ends on them. We've already put fork terminals on the end. For these, I like to use a flathead. It just bites into this better. The only thing I have to do for mounting is I'm going to put a zip tie here and here to hold it, because there's a pocket right behind here that all the wiring goes through. These are merely going to be here just to hold this wire nice and tight so it doesn't move or shake or anything like that. I'm going to use the thicker 8-inch zip tie to do that. And that's it for my power. Remote turn on would power the speaker wires. RCA wise, 6-footer is going to be all I need. I need the same signal to feed A and B and C and D. So A and C, B and D both have to have our 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. There's two different ways I can do this. I can put a set of Y jacks here and then run a single RCA up to the front. Or I can run 6 RCAs here, put a set of Y jacks behind the radio. That is the way I'd like to do this. And the reason why I want to do that is if we decide to ever have this do front, rear, and sub, or add a second amplifier, or anything like that, the RCA will be here already. I can easily just take the RCAs out from behind the radio, hook those in, as opposed to if I did it the other way, I would have to run a whole nother RCA, which would just suck. For the RCAs, we're going to use the Stinger 4000 series. We color code the ends of the RCAs, and I just use standard colors. Even though this is going to be front, sub, I still put the rear so I know which one is which, and it really doesn't matter. I just need to know which one is right and left. Plug those into the amplifier, zip tied them in here, and then coated the whole set, made it one nice bundle. This is exterior tape. The next piece of this is the speaker wires here. The sub wire is already made up and ready to go, but I want to get the other ones on first. And then the thing I always forget, which is the sub wire, is here as well. I think that is going to go out. I don't know which direction this is going to go yet. We have to figure out where we're going to put the bass knob, but I have it all sitting here on my desk so that I don't forget about it. To do the speaker wire, we're going to use some speed wire for that. For those of you who have never seen speed wire before, it is a 9-conductor wire. Inside of this roughly 4 gauge size tube is a set of whites, grays, greens, purple, and then the 9th wire is a remote turn on, which is perfect because we're going to need it for there. I like to remove about 6 inches depending on where this is gonna go, this is gonna come this way, the same size as the RCA's. I just needed this remote wire to reach all the way over here, so that'll be my farthest point away. And I'm gonna twist these up so they are going to shrink just a little bit. No, I think that'll be good. To twist the wire, put in the drill, gently spin it down. As you're doing this, do it in the colors that you want it to be first. So we're gonna go white, gray, then green and purple. These wires tend to get kind of wound into one another. So I fast forwarded a little bit, finished getting all the wires connected to it. Our sub wire is gonna go this way out with the power and ground. The bass knob wire is gonna go with the speaker wire and the RCA's. This is the back of the car and this is the front of the car up here. So the idea is that this will just drop into place and we can run our wires out. A little plastic finishing piece goes on. Meet me in the car and we will get this wired up. Take a look at it. There's 4 bolts that hold the seat to the riser frame here, and we figured it would be easier to remove. The wire is going to run under here. There's a channel for the power, which you can see right there, this section. And then the speaker wires are going to follow the duct system that is this piece here. It'll follow that up into the dash and into the radio. I've also drilled in 2 of the nutserts for the amp rack to attach to. Just get it done, call me when you're ready.
All right, sounds good.
And just like that, the amplifier's in place. 2 screws on the front. Power wire and speaker wire need to be run. Ground is also right here. We're gonna ground it somewhere in this area. Fernando's already drilled the hole in the firewall, right there next to the hood release and right above the main harness. Yes, we could have more than likely gone through that big harness there. However, there's a lot of wire running through there, and if there's ever any problems, it's just way easier for us to take our wire through its own hole and not have to worry about any car warranty issues. Fernando just wanted me to give you this PSA. Before you drill the hole, make sure there's nothing on the other side, such as brake lines, brake boosters, other main harnesses, or anything like that. Drilling a small starter hole and putting a fiberglass pick tool through the hole and finding it on the other side is a good way of doing that. Yes, I know, it sounds like a great idea for a video. You should make one, Fernando.
I should. Yeah, we should do that.
We should do that. We'll do that. The power wire is run through the hole and we're using 3M strip caulk to seal it up from the inside. There's also, as you saw, a grommet in there. So this is double insulated and now it is waterproof. For the ground, we found the factory ground bolt located here next to the seat belt mechanism. There was factory wires grounded in the same spot. It's a nice 10mm bolt. It's pre-sanded. Fernando is connecting the speaker wires up from the speed run. Back at the beginning of the video when we were talking about, opening up the hole here, there's a lot of wires that are going to be coming off of the back of this radio. You have 2 video input outputs, you have backup camera, 2 USBs, speaker wire, 3 RCA's, so there's the module. It's a ton of stuff, plus the stuff that was already there. This is not the easiest thing to do. Oh, and the FM antenna. And if we were adding Sirius XM, the Sirius XM. That's why we removed this top portion here to try to make room for all of this stuff. So if you can go short chassis, I strongly recommend going short chassis in this vehicle, but we're not that fortunate. So yeah, having the hole in the top here, just so that you can slowly pull all the wire up and out of the way. As you can see now, the radio sits in there nice and easy. We were able to utilize that top space. And you want the radio to go in so you're not pushing it. So like if I just held it here, it's not trying to fall back out. Bunching up too much stuff in the dash, you could pinch wires, or the radio could sit on something or get pushed into metal. And like when people say, all of a sudden I got noise, or all of a sudden something stopped working, or it didn't all of a sudden happen. It was just when you put it in, it was in so tight in the dash that it got caught up on something. Either way, we're to the point where I can finally put these 4 screws in. we're almost ready to hear this bad boy. One thing that Fernando did, we went with the dual USB. We removed the top cigarette lighter and put it in there. The only caveat with doing that, it's a 3-foot cable. It's gonna run up in and then plug into the back of the radio. So this now has to be sitting in the car for it to go all in. The other thing he did when he was doing that is he mounted the bass knob right here below the ignition switch. There's a area of easy access to get to. And I think the only other thing we haven't shown you yet is underneath the hood. So let's go take a look out there and talk about how Fernando came up with the mount.
I did my regular out of the factory bolt battery mount. Use an S-bend, ABS, 1/4 inch, put it in there, take the factory bolt and bolt it in. When they're gonna replace the battery, they don't have to remove a bunch of screws or nothing like that. This is very serviceable too, as you can see. And that's about it.
Time to do a little bit of testing. Radio's in, connected. We're gonna test the polarity. These should all be red. And we got red for that, red for that, and red for that. Dodge will always pop red. It's perfectly fine as long as you know what you're getting into. You just need them to do what you have planned or what you know. It's a checker. It's not a right and wrong. Remember that. With the polarity done, let's check balance and fader to make sure we have that right. All right, that's 4, that's 3, that's 1, both dash and door, and that's 2, both dash and door. Now, since the volume's up, grab the steering wheel controls. That's down. Center the balance and fader back up. Does up work? Yeah, of course it does. Most of the time with iData, if one button is programmed, they'll all be programmed. Very rarely does it not do it. Most of the time, if you run into a problem there, it's because the radio doesn't have a feature you programmed it for, which, there again, that's highly unlikely. We know the zone control works because we tried that before we did anything, which is good because I hate surprises like that at the very end. They suck. My favorite time, going to CarPlay. What's the weather like today?
It's currently cloudy and 75 degrees.
Oh, chilly. Check the backup camera. You gotta start up the car. Even though we tested the backup camera when we started, now that everything is plugged in, we want to check it again. We know that the overhead worked because as soon as it powered back up, that's where it was last time, so it automatically went back to that screen. Throw it in reverse. There again, a beautiful image of the ceiling. With those final tests done, and these are really basic tests, guys, you should always do these before you start putting the dash back together because you saw how hard it was to get this dash in and out. For subwoofer, we went with the Rockford P3 and the factory box. Let's take a look. He uses all of this space, that's why the seats are all tucked in. Therefore, we gave him plenty of wire to move this box wherever he wants, as well as if he wants to pull up these rear seats, he can tuck it into the stow and go floor. But if he wants to move it up there, because he's gonna be filling this up, he can do whatever he wants. We just wanted to make sure there was enough wire for him to be happy. Fernando got the dash all put back together, got the A-pillars on, it's all screwed in. Now it is time to tune this thing and make it sound at the best that it can possibly do. We're doing the front stage upgrade on this, and the reason why we did it that way is because he wants it to have imaging and awesome equalization and everything that we can do by pushing this radio as far as we can. The first thing we're going to do in that is get our center image set up. To do that, we fade it to the front and we play Sheffield Labs Polarity Pulse. It's the same pulsing sound that we use when we're testing the polarity in the door. Start playing the Polarity Pulse, go to your position, and the Kenwood, it has front, left, and right. You can pick whichever seat you want. You can adjust, you can get levels, you can pick all front, all, which is how it comes from the factory. We're sitting in the left front seat, so we want to adjust that one. So we'll go into the adjust mode. And the one thing you see is there's already numbers in here. If it's working the way you want it to, meaning you're pretty happy with the way it sounds, then you can leave it. Otherwise, go in and set everything to 0, which we don't need to listen to the popping. So we'll adjust. And it takes a couple minutes because you gotta, we're gonna Alright, we've zeroed everything out. This is just the quick, easy way for us to do this. We'll press play. Right now the sound is coming from this corner here. Now depending on the radio you have, start adjusting this speaker's delay. If it starts to move this way across the dash, you're adjusting the right one. Now, and what I mean by that is, even though this is the one you're supposed to be adjusting, sometimes in these radios, you actually have to adjust that one in order to move this one across, just because of the way the DSP is made up. As you can hear, I don't know if you can hear that, but there's a huge echo in here. Put this one back to 0, and we'll start moving this guy. Starting to move over. And if you look at the display here, you'll see why it's creating that delay by adjusting this, because you see that it hasn't added any milliseconds delay to this. It's actually adding the milliseconds of delay to these other speakers. Proper seating is also very important. So if I'm sitting here, this is how I drive. So I want to make sure that I'm looking this way. Obviously when you turn your head, you're doing this, it's going to change. But for the initial set, you don't want to turn your head like this, because that's changing where your ears are. So look forward, and if you have to close your eyes, close your eyes. It still sounds like it's about here. And when you do this, it'll also change a little bit. So this is why we tape measure our seats before. Now keep in mind, this is a radio. It's playing both the mid bass and the dash speaker at the same time. You're just trying to get it as close as you can. That actually sounds pretty good. I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna go back to my fader. I'm gonna fade it all the way to the rear, and I'm gonna repeat the process. And what I'm looking to do here is have it sound like the sound is coming from right here down the middle. That's actually pretty close. I'll go back into my balance and fader, center it up. And that's it. We're pretty good. Now if I want the rears to sound like they're further back, I can add equal amounts of delay to both of them, and that'll push them back even further. So right now I'm at a half a foot, so I'm going to add a half a foot to this one, and I'll add another half a foot to this side. And that's pushed them back further, and it really emphasizes this front. I like to get into the EQ. For that, we're going to use the audio control iTest mic and an iPad. For equalization, there again, I like to put the microphone up here. You can move it around a little bit. There again, it's a radio. It's just got to be good. I'm going to use the Educar Test and Tune app for my pink noise. There's only so many things you can get rid of, and me talking, of course, is changing it. This is the first go around to see what it looks like, strictly using pink noise. Before you go any further, go in and make it a memory preset. And on a Kenwood, you hit memory, you hit preset select, and now it is burned into there. The reason why we do that is because you can make up to 4 memories, but we need to start somewhere. And the weird thing about using a radio is that sometimes you're going to add some of this back in just because it doesn't sound the way it's supposed to, and other times you're going to leave it and remove it when I'm doing anything. And I play it every time. It is hella good, but no doubt. If you make an adjustment, make it another memory. That way you can A/B between the two, which is what I just did there. I also went in and I adjusted the time alignment slightly. Now that we're playing music and we have some equalization, it seemed like it was over just a little bit too far. However, I will say my hearing does suck on that side, and I'll have Fernando sit over here to double check it, and he'll probably go, no, you had it right. But anyways, so now I can A/B between the two. And I apologize, you guys aren't really getting to hear this song that much, but you know, DRM sucks. I like my preset 1 better. What I'm noticing is when I go to preset 2, it is a little louder, but I'm actually losing some of the stage. So that means that, it's not worth it. And the other advantage too is I can now go into sound effects. This is in the Kenwood radios, and I have the ability to adjust space as well as stage. And now I'm going to try and see if those do anything for my sound. Stage EQ is, that for this particular system really didn't work that well. It made it very narrow and almost, I don't know, it was weird. It just had a strange effect. Did you hear that effect? Oh, over here it was almost blinding. Space enhancement, small, actually added a little bit to it. It kind of kept my EQ the way it was sounding previous to preset 2 adjustment, but then also added what I liked about preset 2 into it, but kept all the sound of preset 1. So I'm gonna leave that the way it is. I'm happy with the way it sounds. I need to go into audio memory and select audio setup memory and select yes. I can also lock the system, which will keep the customer out of specific things. I don't want to do that because, hey, it's yours, go have fun. I am going to come into the equalization and I'm going to select memory, and I'm going to make preset 2 as well as preset 3, and then I'll also do preset 4 my setting. And the reason why I like to do that is so that if he gets in here and he adjusts it, and let's say he makes his own preset 1, he can always go back and just recall one of my other memories. Then the other cool thing that the Kenwood radios have is all source. Once I hit all source here, it's going to take this EQ setting and put it all the sources across the board. The reason why that is cool is that if you are listening to your phone and you change the EQ setting and you just mess it all up, you can go back to radio, open up the EQ, hit all source, and it'll take your old EQ setting and put it back onto the source that you messed up. So it helps you retain things, so you don't always lose an EQ setting if you start playing with stuff, which really is kind of depressing. This system is set up, this is ready to go, it's deliverable. Hang on. That can only mean one thing, Fernando.
Yes?
Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
I hope you guys enjoyed this one. It's a lot different than what we normally do as far as vehicles go, but as far as systems go, we do a lot of these.
A lot of these, yeah.
Front stage upgrade is becoming one of our most popular installs, and using the deck power to power the rears because it has crossovers and level control. That is the most important thing. I didn't talk about that, but in the crossover settings for the Kenwood, you have the ability to go in and bring the level down for the rear, as well as you can also do it in the time alignment setting. We can bring the level down for the rear. And what that does is that allows us to keep the level in line with the external amplifiers, because there's a different power band as they roll up, and we want to make sure that they stay in parallel with one another. Also, the factory amplifier runs out of power a lot faster than the aftermarket's will. We want to make sure we can turn our volume all the way up to get that full 5 volts of output. Pretty cool.
Yeah, very nice.
It's awesome, it's exciting, but that's it for today.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.